Thanks so much, Amber. Hi, everybody. Great to see so many folks from around the world. I'm launching the presentation here, so give it just a second. There we go. So I'm not going to take too much time this evening. I'll give a quick rundown of Clean the World Foundation, who we are, what we do, and outline a little bit about what we're doing around coronavirus response as well. As Amber said, it's crazy to think where we are today. When we scheduled this presentation a few months ago, I never would have thought that hygiene would be as critical and as urgently needed as it is right now. So this presentation is perhaps timely, if nothing else. So we'll go through this for about 10 minutes, and then we'd love to have any questions at the end of this. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. If you're not familiar with Clean the World Foundation, our mission is very, very simple. We are dedicated to achieving SDG 6, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Talk about 17 things that need to happen for a sustainable future by 2030. And the sixth goal is universal access for all the world's people for water, sanitation, and hygiene. So our mission at Clean the World Foundation is to be a part of a concert of other organizations, Rotary, International Rotary Foundation included as part of that, to make sure that we're doing our part to help everyone in the world get access to water, sanitation, hygiene, as well as feminine hygiene. The populations that we focus on really are those who are homeless or who are in extreme poverty situations, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. And we also take a focus on making sure that we are sustainable in everything that we do, and I'll talk about what that means as well. But first, I want to talk about the need. I think I'm preaching to the choir a little bit on this one, but from a hygiene perspective particularly, we know that the leading causes of death for children globally are hygiene-related illnesses. Diarrheal diseases and pneumonia are the top two killers of kids. Today, they claim about 3,600 lives for kids under the age of 5 every single day. That's more than AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis combined. Now, that number has come down about 60% in the past 10 years, but 3,600 kids a day is still way, way more than is acceptable to I think all of us on this call. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. The good news is that access to water, sanitation, hygiene can actually cut that mortality rate in half or more. In fact, hand washing alone is the best way to prevent those deaths. But when you couple it with sustainable access to clean water, improved sanitation facilities as well, you see exponential results. We'll talk about some examples of that in a few minutes. So Clean the World Foundation started 11 years ago, actually. And we actually started as a recycling organization, as a for-profit company that wanted to take leftover amenities from hotels, recycle them, and get them to people in need around the world. Because the people who founded the organization realized you have a tremendous amount of waste and at the same time a tremendous amount of need. In fact, hotels are throwing away millions of partially used hygiene items every single day, and yet the leading causes of death for kids globally are because they don't have access to hygiene. So it all started with that idea, the juxtaposition of the need and the supply, about 11 years ago. Fast forward to where we are today, Clean the World Foundation is now a separate NGO. Part of what we do is we take those recycled supplies and we use them in programs, and then part of what we do is operate our own outcome-based programs serving people in need around the world. In the past 11 years, we've reached about 12 million people with WASH resources, supplies, and educational programming across 127 countries. We're not active in 127 countries today. Sometimes it feels like that. We tend to be active in about a few dozen, maybe 40 countries or so at any given time, which is still quite a bit. And right now we're serving about 2.5 million people around the world every year. The way that we approach our work is something that we've learned from a variety of other players in the WASH space, in the nonprofit community globally. And it really is a needs-based approach. We don't want to come in as an NGO and assume that we know the right way to do things and what the community needs. So we talk with experts in the field, we talk with community leaders to understand what really does a community need from a WASH standpoint. We then work with community leaders to design multi-year programming that sustainably meets those needs. This programming is going to make sure that they have access to resources and infrastructure. That means either ourselves building access to water, water wells, water infrastructure, or partnering with entities like Rotary. We'll talk about a couple of projects that we've worked on with Rotary as well, to bring in access to water, to bring in access to sanitation, toilets, and the like, and then to bring in access to hygiene supplies. Most importantly, to make sure that we have an ongoing outcome-based educational program that teaches people not just how to use these items, but why they're so important and how to maintain them and to use them properly for the rest of their lives. So over the period of 3 to 5 years, our goal is to have infrastructure that's sustainable, resources that are locally available and sustainable, and behaviors that have changed. For us, it's all about behavior change, taking a population that's not accessing or using things in the right way, and making sure that they are then doing so by the end of programming. And for us, again, it's all about local sustainability. So to do that, we identify what a community might need from a supply standpoint, and then also help to build local enterprises to make those supplies local. So maybe it's training women to make their own soap and then sell that in the community, make it available to the schools and the clinics. Maybe it's training women to make menstrual hygiene pads, reusable menstrual hygiene pads, again, selling some and making some available to schools and clinics, things like that. Whatever supplies are either unavailable or too expensive for the local population, we help start businesses to meet those needs, to bring those prices down to where they're realistic, and take a micro-enterprise, microfinancing approach to that. So again, a lot of what we do is around WASH education. We're making sure that communities have access to the infrastructure that they need, building the access to water, building the access to sanitation, making sure that they have access to hygiene supplies. But most importantly, designing and implementing a locally customized educational curriculum that is taught on a weekly basis in schools, in healthcare facilities, in community centers. And again, this is designed to change behaviors long term. So at the start of going into a community, we do a broad needs assessment and baseline survey to understand what are the rates of diarrheal diseases, what are the rates of school absenteeism, what is the local typical wage for a family in the community, things like that. And then design programming that is geared towards addressing the needs within that community. So for example, in India, we designed a 3-year program that served about 5,000 kids across 36 schools, partly in Calcutta, partly in the rural Bihar state. And these were 2 areas where families didn't have access to anything related to WASH. Schools, clinics didn't have access to it either. And then at the end of this 3-year program, where we brought in access to water, trained people how to sustain that access locally themselves, maintain that access. Same with toilets, same with soap, things like that. At the end of this program, we saw 80% of students and 70% of parents were actually applying proper WASH practices without prompting, meaning that in just observational studies, they were washing their hands in the right ways at the right times. They were accessing water appropriately, filtering that water, preserving and storing that water appropriately, things like that. And the net result of this was that we saw, after 3 years, a 97% decrease in diarrheal diseases across that population of 5,000 kids. So a comprehensive WASH education program, locally designed, locally led, very closely monitored and evaluated. It was very successful in driving down that disease burden in that community. In Tanzania, we've seen similar results. Again, 5,000 kids served, 49% decrease in incidences of diarrheal disease, and a 42% increase in school attendance, both within the first year of program. So we, again, have operated this program in a variety of locations, but one that I wanted to call attention to is in Uganda. in a community called Mirakit, Uganda, where we're actually partnering with Rotary International, Rotary Foundation, on the Sam Awori Memorial Project. The former Rotary president-elect, who sadly passed away a few years ago, happy to partner on a program and a project in his family's community in rural eastern Uganda in Miraket. And this was a community of over 15,000, almost 20,000 people. They didn't have access to water. They were fetching water from swamps, very dirty, very unhealthy water. They had a single borehole well that was only intermittently functional, operational. They had a healthcare facility without any access to water, serving 16,000 people. And if you wanted your doctor to wash your hands, you had to bring in your own water, your own sanitation supplies, your own hygiene supplies, things like that. So Rotary built a solar-powered well with community access points in all 6 schools, the healthcare facility. They built toilets at all the schools and the healthcare facility. And then Clean the World Foundation came in and provided a comprehensive wash education program, training the community on how to maintain those items, how to use those items, and then how to stay healthy long term. And we're happy to say that within the first 6 months of programming, we saw a 60% decline in cases of diarrheal disease as a result of this comprehensive project in partnership with Rotary. So always very grateful for the work of Rotary. I'm honored to be a Rotarian myself. And just thrilled with the work that Rotary is doing and really leading in a global way, addressing some of these critical, urgent issues in a global, from a global standpoint. So WASH education is a huge part of what we do, but it's not all we do. We also do quite a bit of emergency relief work, very, very timely and pertinent to today's issue with coronavirus. So in emergency situations, either humanitarian settings or in natural disasters or crises, like we're seeing now, we target populations that are most at risk and most vulnerable for the spread of hygiene-related illnesses. So in the wake of natural disasters, there are populations that are in critical need, urgent need of these supplies, clean water, sanitation supplies, hygiene supplies. They really do make the difference between life and death in the wake of natural disasters. So we're happy to step up and provide, or distribute, I should say, stockpiles of these wash kits and soap, things like that, in the aftermath of disasters. So last year, distributed critically needed items to over 200,000 people across the Bahamas in the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian. We served over 300,000 people in Mozambique and Zimbabwe in the aftermath of Cyclone Idai. Those are just 2 examples. We tend to serve about 1 million disaster victims a year. And I'll talk about what we're doing around coronavirus in just a second. We also served about 1 million refugees last year, because refugee camps are often very cramped, very squalid conditions, and these are populations that are in dire need of these wash supplies. So step in to provide access to water, hand washing stations, soap, things like that in refugee camps. We currently work in Syria, Somalia, Bangladesh, Yemen, places like that. And again, currently serving about 1 million people a year in those efforts. And then in the United States as well, we do quite a bit of stuff with homeless shelters, food pantries, things like that. And in fact, over 14,000 people last year in the aftermath of some of the wildfires in California. Again, we're very active on a day-to-day basis. These are just some of the examples of the work that we're doing around emergency relief. And in the emergency relief standpoint, we're actually using bars of soap that are recycled from the hotels. So we're collecting soap from 8,000 hotels, recycling it into new bars of soap, and then using those to distribute in these times of crisis. Our global wash education programs tend to have that soap sourced locally, but in things like this, these emergency situations, we stockpile these items in critical positions around the world so that they can be rapidly released in the aftermath of disasters. Which brings us to coronavirus. Interestingly enough, hand washing is one of the most effective ways to prevent the spread of coronavirus. So for us, we're getting some interesting pro hand washing PR right now. I have always been very sad to see how few people have properly washed their hands. I travel every week. There's nothing worse than standing in a men's room at an airport, seeing the filth, and then seeing how few people wash their hands properly, if at all. And so this is a great opportunity for people to evaluate their own proper hand washing procedures, 20 seconds with soap and water to make sure that they're keeping themselves and their families clean. Unfortunately, in situations like this, vulnerable populations need soap desperately, right? Hand washing with soap, the most effective way to prevent the spread of coronavirus, yet we have populations in the United States, around the world, that don't have access to soap. In the United States, government support does not provide or cover access to soap. Personal hygiene items are not covered by food stamps, things like that. So there are populations within the United States even that are at great risk for catching coronavirus, yet can't have access to the most basic supplies that will keep them healthy and help them prevent the spread and prevent catching this. So in the United States, we're in the process of distributing enough hygiene supplies to serve 1.5 million people. That's in homeless shelters and food pantries across all 50 states here in the USA. And again, we'll also be serving refugee camps and IDP camps globally, an additional 1 million people to make sure they have the resources that they need. As a matter of fact, I'm leaving tomorrow morning with UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, on a tour of their camps across Central America to make sure that those facilities have the resources that they need to stay healthy in this time of crisis. So we're happy to be able to step up and address some of these urgent issues. And the last item that we do is part of our work is making sure, again, that we have the ability to sustain our impact. We don't want to come in, drop off stuff, teach a class, and leave. We want to be community partners for several years, and we want to make sure that local community can sustain this impact long-term without us having to be babysitters or having to hold their hand. And a big part of that is our microfinancing program, training local people to create their own businesses, to create those supplies, so that we're improving the local economy, but also making sure that there's an affordable source of the wash supplies that they need locally to sustain that impact. So in Uganda, as part of the Rotary International Partnership, we've trained female teachers and tailors in the community to make reusable menstrual pads. We've provided the girls with underwear, so they have somewhere to put these reusable menstrual pads. And then the teachers are also training the girls how to make their own reusable menstrual pads. So we're providing them with the supplies and the training. It's a train the trainer model, so this will carry itself onward. And then they're able to use some of these items themselves, as well as keep a stockpile in the schools and the clinic for people in need, and then also sell part of what they're making to earn an income. So it tends to be a win-win across the board for the entire community. So for us, it's about infrastructure and access to supplies. It's about education to make sure that we're using it the right way. And it's about locally supporting the economy to make sure that that impact can sustain itself long-term. So that's the big stuff I've got for you. Short and sweet, and again, honored to speak tonight. So grateful to Amber and everybody on the call for listening, and would be more than happy to answer any questions either right now or by email. My email address is there on the screen for you all if you're interested.
I have a question. Hey, Sam, that was great. I absolutely love it, and I actually want to work for you now.
Come on over.
Where is this based? Where are you based?
Good question. So I'm based in Washington, D.C., so that's where the base of the foundation is. So I'm here with our global head of programs, our global head of development, and then we have teams of staff around the world. So we have, in the United States, we have big warehouses in Orlando and Las Vegas. We have warehouses for rapid distribution in the Caribbean, Southeast Asia, in Hong Kong, Singapore, places like that. We have an office in Amsterdam as well. So we truly are a global organization.
Thank you.
Are you hiring?
We're always hiring, for better and for worse. Now, we are an NGO, so the pay isn't great, but you get to work with me. So it's
Well, so on another scale, not on like working for you, but how can we work with you?
Absolutely. That's a great Great question. You know, is local Rotary clubs are interested in, you know, doing wash projects. We're always happy to be a partner in those efforts. We're able to bring matching funds to the table ourselves typically, and love to be a part of that. So Rotary is just a natural fit for us. And I'm excited to have a chance to spread this word so that we can partner on more projects. So as there are wash opportunities, we'd love to come in and either provide guidance or play a role in that. And then always, you know, happy to be the beneficiary of any fundraising development dollars. As a nonprofit, we're fully dependent upon donors to support our efforts. And again, grateful for the Rotary Foundation for supporting that as well.
I have a question. So this weekend, we are teaching on hand washing soap and teaching on the coronavirus in Rwanda, Africa. We do monthly seminars there. So this is just in the nick of time. What would you say our problem in the rural village there is access to water? So they have to walk 3 or 4 miles to get the water. It's been making me think about this a lot more. We're giving them soap this weekend, but it's not going to last longer than a month. So we'll start making brainstorming around this issue. I guess my question is, do you work with smaller organizations, or do you kind of go with, how does that process work? Like, how can I get Clean the World to come to the little villages in Rwanda?
Yeah, great question. We are, we have no restrictions around size, I should say. So from very small to very large, you know, we go wherever the need is greatest. So send me an email. We would love to follow up and see what we can do there. We've worked in Rwanda in the past, and at the very least, some ideas that I can share with you on what we've seen work and what's in the community, and you know, would love to share those and see if there's anything else we can do to help.
Okay, great.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. It's a little more technical, maybe. But hi, Sam. It's Neil. I'm in Haiti, and I'm not part of this club. I'm actually part of the E Club of Wash, based in District 9980. I saw in your metrics of the Samawari project in Uganda that you had a 60% reduction in diarrhea, something that's notoriously difficult to measure. How do you capture that data?
Absolutely. So it's in partnership with the local healthcare facilities. Part of what we ask is that they are transparent with us, demonstrating the documents that they have, tracking cases of diarrhea, pre-intervention, and then also allowing us to have folks on hand for sporadic surveys and assessments ourselves. So there's always a little bit of, you know, you take it, you don't want to, I mean, I've gone into communities where, oh yes, we don't have diarrhea anymore. You know, that's not accurate. So we tend to have or recommend that medical professionals come in occasionally, that we send in to both spot check to make sure that things are going well, and unannounced visits. That's something the community has to sign up for and agree to. And then making sure that we've got transparency around all the documentation related to this. And part of what we've also found is that it's important to have a variety of metrics that you're looking at. So we tend to look at 15 to 20 different metrics for a community that allow us to sort of triangulate and validate the reliability of the data around diarrheal disease decreases. Because if you're just tracking that as a singular metric, it may or may not be accurate. But if you're able to track that in conjunction with some other indicators that tend to be sister metrics or sister indicators that have similar outcomes, we found that is a more effective way to do it. So sporadic spot checks, outside medical professionals evaluating unannounced, and a wide variety of metrics to help triangulate the reality of the results.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
So Sam, I noticed in your presentation that your model is a lot like the Rotary Foundation model. And I wanted you to tell everybody why you're a Rotarian now.
Oh my goodness, I am a Rotarian for that reason, Amber. I mean, it's funny. I've wanted to be a Rotarian for years, going back, ironically, a long time ago. The very first, so I grew up in Appalachia, southwestern Virginia, not far from where Amber is. I grew up in rural Floyd County, Virginia, and we didn't have indoor plumbing until I was 14. So wash is something that's near and dear to my heart, just as it relates to that. But when I was 13, I had an opportunity to leave home for the very first time to go on a summer exchange program to Australia, ironically enough. I've never been on an airplane, never left, rural Southwest Virginia. Here I am getting on an airplane. Well, I had to raise money so that I could foot the bill for the airfare and things like that. And believe it or not, Rotary Club in Hillsville, Virginia, is the group that backed me. So they supported my travel, sent me halfway around the world, and that's what made me fall in love with Rotary. So I've been kind of tangentially involved with Rotary for years, and then when Rotary International has been so involved in polio eradication, which is something I've worked in a previous life, and then now that we're making the switch to WASH, that is just a natural fit for what's near and dear for me. But then also the fact that the approach that's being taken is the right approach. There are 99 ways to do it wrong and one way to do it right, and that's the way that Rotary International is doing it. So for me, it's a wide variety of reasons, and now that we finally got e-clubs, it's just a win-win and something I can finally do. So it's an honor to be a part of such an incredible global family.
That was awesome. Are there any other questions or comments from anyone?
I have another question. Is it just you going to these different communities and checking things out, or do you have multiple people going to the different countries and evaluating and setting up, and then teachers and that sort of thing?
Absolutely, great question. So we've got a whole mess of staff traveling around the world at any given time. So I have the luxury and the pleasure of getting to do that some of the time myself. But we have a global team that supports that effort, really drives that effort for us. We also have the regional staff. We've got staff in Kampala, Uganda, that help look regionally. We've got staff in the Caribbean, Dominican Republic, and beyond. So our regional staff help drive that on a day-to-day basis. We've got global staff that will help drive that on a sort of spot check regional, a quarterly basis, and then I get to do it some of the time.
So Sam, if you had any final thoughts, because this is going to go on Facebook later on today or tonight and tomorrow, what would you like to tell all of the world?
Wash your hands, bro. It's critical that people understand the importance of proper hygiene, not just now because of coronavirus, but every day. And understanding that we in developed countries are very fortunate that we have this luxury that we take for granted, that we shouldn't be taking for granted. But it's also important to remember those who are less fortunate, and grateful for Rotary for stepping up and being a part of that, and know that we're here to do anything we can to help that endeavor.